The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. I'm Jon Birdsong with Atlanta Ventures, and in today's episode, we have Sandeep Ahuja, the co-founder and CEO of cove.tool. Sandeep's love for building and architecture started at a young age across several countries she lived in with her parents, who were diplomats. After graduating from Georgia Tech's esteemed architecture program, Sandeep and her co-founders started a consulting firm that eventually evolved into a software company called cove.tool. They just finished raising $5.7 million for the next phase. In today's episode, we talk about how to transition a business into a scalable software company, fundraising, clean energy, and more. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to the Atlanta Story. Sandeep, welcome to the Atlanta Story podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, we're going to have a great 30, 40 minutes talking all things architecture, design, entrepreneurship, building. Right now, you're CEO of cove.tool, which is about 3 years old. Y'all just raised a significant round, Series A round, which we definitely want to get into. I think that was about $5.7 million.
That's exactly right.
Nice. And welcome to the Atlanta Story. We're excited.
Thank you.
So we let's dive straight into your journey to Atlanta, right? Some of the readings and research before have shared that, it sounds like every 4 years you were in another city, another country. Share with the listenership just your upbringing.
Oh gosh, I think my upbringing forced me to be good at making friends because with my dad being a diplomat, we literally had to pack our bags, move to a new country, figure out the culture, figure out the language, figure out how people make friends.
Sure.
Do that, and then move to a completely different country.
So Russia, Tanzania, New Delhi, give us the list and rundown.
Yeah. So when I was young, like super tiny, I was in Saudi Arabia. Then which was of course, all deserts and super hot and completely different culture than I was ever used to. Then we moved to Russia, which was a complete transition. That's when I swore off going to cold places. Which kind of ties into why I'm in Georgia. Like that's when I was like, I'm never going to a cold place ever again. And then of course, we went to Tanzania, which worked out well. And that's where I did all of my high school, which was super awesome. Again, completely hot and humid climate type. And then I went to India for a little bit and found my way here.
Wow. So talk to us about the spark of design and architecture, and when did you know that you wanted to be an architect? And tell us that.
I think it's one of those stories that people tell me that it sounds too good to be true, but genuinely I knew in eighth grade I was going to be an architect, and I started saying that to my parents. I think I'm going to be an architect, and then they kept thinking, oh, she'll grow out of it, it'll happen. And then 12th grade I was like, I think I'm going to be an architect. And then I became an architect.
Was there a class? Was there a moment?
Not really. I think it's just because I traveled to so many different places. And even when we were in all of these different countries, and my dad's not an architect, nor is my mom, or really anybody in my family, but they really were interested going to places and going to see buildings. And I really, really always enjoyed that, like going to see buildings, trying to understand them, try to understand why a certain building is a certain way versus another building is a different way. So that kind of always attracted me. So I kind of geeked into it myself until I went the ultimate geek route.
Sure. And when you mean buildings, are you talking skyscrapers, or are you talking historical buildings, all the above?
Everything. I think each one of them is like fascinating and different and designed for its own unique way. And also because they were so different in each country, right? Because I mean, certain types of buildings were different, like your homes or smaller buildings would be very different from Russia to Tanzania just because the weather is so different. But other types of building would be identical. Like I could see the same skyscraper in Moscow that I saw in Riyadh, or the same one that I saw in Dar es Salaam in India. It was identical.
Well, not to get too far ahead, but let's talk about just the evolutions of buildings, right? The evolution of buildings. I read somewhere where 50% of emissions comes from buildings, which is, I feel like everyone focuses on cars, but the reality is where we work and where several people live, that buildings are huge emission generators. Why is that, and what has evolved since, let's just say, 50 years?
Oh gosh, yeah. The last 50 years have not been the most exciting in terms of building and emissions, because we've really gone down not a pleasant path in terms of emissions, mostly because for a long time, I don't think we understood or wanted to understand the amount of role that buildings can play. And for example, now globally, it's a 39% number. And of course, like city of Atlanta, that's like 60%. So it's a pretty big chunk of the pie. And it's the strange one because, buildings don't, unless it's an industry, they're not going to fume out smoke for people to be like, oh, there's fumes, it's bad for us. Right. It's none of that. And it's just spaces that we're in. But it takes so much energy to put the materials together that go into creating a building. And then after that initial energy is complete, which in a lot of cases is mandatory, right? Like we have to have materials to pull a building together. But even so, we can choose better materials that use less energy to pull together. But even once they're built, the amount of energy it takes to heat and cool and ventilate our spaces, the lighting, the equipment, like we never used to need HVAC systems all the time. We used to literally be open to opening windows and just, being okay with it. And we're just not at a time where that's okay. So we're kind of coming full circle back where natural ventilation is the cool new thing to do. Yep. It's like, it's not the cool new thing. Yeah. We're just going back to what we needed to do all along.
Yeah. It's like Jimmy Carter in the White House where, he didn't run air conditioning. And so let's say a building is, if they have an emissions portfolio, right? What is 80% of the exhaust of that building?
Yeah, a good so if you look at a pie chart, because somehow that's how I think about any kind of energy use, a good piece of that pie is going to be your heating and cooling, let's say for an office space or a home or any kind of a, like a space that you typically occupy. It's very unique spaces like, I don't know, like a grocery store or a lab where it would be equipment. Because in grocery stores, we got to have all those refrigerators. In a lab, we have to have all of that equipment. In hospitals, we have to have all of the different surgical spaces that need really high ventilation so that virus doesn't go from one person to another. And that's great and that's needed. But for a good majority of the spaces, it's literally just us relying a whole lot more on bad, unnecessary technology. Like even for lights, we don't have to design spaces with tiny windows so people don't get daylight and then have lights on all the time. It's not necessary.
So as a simpleton coming to the energy space, when I look at a building, what should I be looking for in terms of efficiency on the outside, right? Obviously, LEED certified is kind of the industry standard that's been around for probably 20 years. But how should the common person be looking at a building of like, okay, well, that's up to standards today?
I think that's a really, really good question because it's such a hard one. Unfortunately, outside of standards like LEED or Living Building Challenge, there's not a real way to say that, okay, we didn't go through all of this certification, but we're doing the right thing. One of the ways to do that is to talk about a building energy use intensity, which is what, of course, cove.tool also measures, but it's basically how much energy does a square foot of your building use over the course of a year. And then there's benchmarks that you can compare your building to, like, okay, this is my office building. Let's say I use 50 energy use intensity, EUI, and a standard building of this type would use 30. So I'm not doing so good. Or if I'm 50 and standard uses 150, then I am good. And these benchmarks exist and are also, automated.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to cove.tool because that is, that's a key part to your story. And let's go back to New Delhi, and then after New Delhi, straight to Atlanta or straight to Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Was Georgia Tech? What attracted you to Georgia Tech? Was it the specific program or the name?
It was this one man. It was Godfried Augenbro. He led the high performance building lab, and I was actually a licensed architect in India doing that. And I thought that that was my path for a little while there. And he was actually passing through New Delhi when I was there, doing lectures for other people, and I happened to attend and actually happened to meet him.
Wow.
And then we had like an hour-long conversation. And I knew that I was going to go to Georgia and study with this person.
So tell me more about him. I mean, I've never heard of Godfried. Is he is he a pioneer in education and thinking?
He's a godfather of performance modeling. Like he really, really is. Like he's written the energy regulations, like which exist everywhere in the world. He's written those for certain countries. He came up with a strategy on how to actually allow everybody to do performance modeling versus like 5 people of every 1,000. Like he's a badass.
So he's a Georgia Tech, and you were like, I'll see you there. I'll see you in Atlanta.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was like, I'm gonna after the conversation, I was like, I'm gonna apply. He's like, okay, apply. And then it was really fulfilling, to actually go through the program with him, and the way that he thinks about it and really breaks down first principles, because it's less about all the gymnastics around and acrobatics around performance modeling, but it's like, what are we actually talking about, which I think was very unique of the program. And that particular program is top rated in the country to do performance modeling. And it was really satisfying then to see after he retired, which he did last year. I was honored to be on the search committee for the replacement. It's crazy. Of course, the legacy continues on with more people that are filling in these big shoes, but I think it's exciting.
Fascinating. So went to the Georgia Tech program, 2-year program.
Yes.
And then in the back of your mind, are you saying one day I want to go start a company, or do you want to go scale a kind of a traditional architect firm? What vision did you have while you were studying?
Interestingly as well, like I always wanted to start my own firm, not for any other reason. Like I loved having a boss when I had one. Definitely like it better now, but not that I minded having one ever.
Sure.
But it's just something that I felt I wanted to do, like kind of the whole way through. So after Georgia Tech, when I started working at a different company, that was great. I thought it was super enriching for an experience, but it also kind of told me that if I really want to make a change at the pace that I know change can be made, I got to go solo. I have to do this on my own, because there's no way for me to wait for approvals and the right politics and the right hierarchy to say yes. Sounds
like an entrepreneur right at heart. Where do you get that sort of drive? Is it your mom or your dad, or is it grandma?
I have no idea. My parents tell me that they're shocked that I'm from their family. They're like, this makes no sense. Both of my parents have been government servants their whole life, and their jobs are hard, but they're not going out and trying to start from scratch. And they're like, we have no idea how you get this. This makes no sense, but you keep doing what you're doing.
And where are they now? Where are they located? I know every 4 years they packed up. Where are they in the stage of their careers, their lives?
So my dad retired last year.
Okay.
And now he's a full-time marathon runner. He's so much fitter than I ever could be. Like it's crazy. They're both in New Delhi, India. And my mom's still working, from home right now. But my dad's just kind of doing his running thing. That's his full-time job now.
I kind of see where the drive, may morph from. So working at a big firm, always knew you wanted to go start your own, due to the velocity of decisions and outcomes, which makes total sense. How did you break off to go off and do your own thing? Like what decision process was there? How did you go get your first customer in? And this is pre-cove.tool. This was called Pattern, right?
Yeah.
Which was your kind of agency or design firm, architect firm. Help us walk the listeners through your decision-making process of, well, there's a lot of people that don't want bosses, right? And then there's other people who are like, well, I'm just going to go do it. And was there a specific moment where you were sitting and you were like, all right, now's the time?
Actually, not really. I wish I was a little bit more planned. Actually, in retrospect, I guess it didn't matter, but I had no plan whatsoever. Me and my co-founder, Patrick, who's also part of cove.tool, we were at the same company at the time. And it was literally just one Friday, and we'd always been brainstorming about starting a company together. And it was a Friday. We're like, okay, let's do it. And we're like, okay, if by Monday we still feel the same way, we should give in our 2 weeks notice. By Monday, we still felt the same way. So we gave our 2 weeks notice, and then that was it. So then we're on a dining table, no customers, no idea on how to get customers, no more upcoming paychecks. And we're like, okay, we got to figure this out, and we got to figure this out now. So the need to figure it out, I think, is what drove us.
Did y'all have a game plan around like, all right, we've got 3 months or 6 months of runway where we can, where we can get to ramen profitable, knowing that, it's not like you're building a product yet. This is more just, look, all of our learnings from education and what we've trained for and our experience, that's something we can go sell tomorrow. Was there kind of a savings tool that y'all said, all right, we got 6 months, and if we can't get the momentum, then we'll go back? Or how did you think about that?
Also, interestingly, we didn't, right? So we weren't planning. We were like, we're just going to do this.
A very true entrepreneur at heart.
We didn't think about failure because we didn't want to. We knew that if we thought about, honestly, failure was not a thought that we even planned for. Maybe we should have, but we really didn't. And I remember there was that. And we were doing everything, right? Like, for example, to get customers, I downloaded the list of every single architecture firm in Atlanta. And I just went down. It was like a few thousand people. I was like, okay, I can make these many calls every day. That's how many people I'm going to call. And I'm going to be like, hey, do you need building performance services? Until somebody said yes. And they were like, okay, come to our office, give us a demo. We're like, okay, yes, let's do it.
And we're going to take a quick break here and share that this podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business out of Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com. Now help us understand in the architecture world, you've got obviously buildings are being created and designed, but then y'all have the niche of performance management, and share a little bit more about what that is.
Definitely. So what we do is basically what every building requires, but not many people can do, and not many software exists to do that. So while buildings are being drawn and people have all of their CAD software or, however they're drawing their buildings to design that it's going to be a rectangle or a square, the shape and all that good stuff, every building has to meet a local energy regulation. Every building has to meet good daylighting. For example, if you ever hire an architect, and maybe you have in the past, to do your house or what have you, you want to have good daylighting and good views. And when you're working on the laptop, you don't want to be bothered by glare. Every building needs that analysis and needs that work. But a lot of times, other than the regulation standpoint, like the energy regulation, that's a mandatory, architects guess the other part because they don't know what else to do. So what we basically did as consultants and now in the automated platform is make that information be available. So you can see that if you're going to put your window here versus here, it's going to give you 5% more daylight. And if you choose this other glass product versus this other glass product, it'll be 10% cheaper, but your energy will still be the same. So go with the cheaper one.
Got it. And so there's so many variables that people can plug and play, and not jumping too far ahead, but to do that is a very manual process, correct?
It's completely like 100% manual, like literally manual.
And so when y'all started doing this over and over again for the different architecture firms that you were calling up, which, by the way, y'all, it sounds like y'all were becoming the preeminent resource and thought leader on performance management within, design and architecture, at least locally. And then, who knows? I mean, probably globally.
No, definitely. We were super grateful to be able to get all of those fantastic opportunities to work on like $500, $600 million projects that we never thought we would get an opportunity to work on so quickly. But I thought we were definitely grateful to be able to get to do that. But yeah, we were doing all of that manually. And every time we did another project, we always created like a little bit of script to make our process faster the next time. We're like, okay, that took me 40 hours. Let me write a little bit of code so that next time I can do it in 10 or 5 or 1.
Absolutely. And so as an entrepreneur, how do you start thinking about productizing some of the services that you have done, right? Because there's a lot of people that, every day they're going in, punching the clock, doing this exact same process and manual work. But someone on the now cove.tool team was like, hey, this is something that we can productize. And how did you think about that? How did your co-founder think about that? Is it something that y'all were constantly brainstorming? Like, talk to us about that creation process.
It was definitely something. So both of us that were at the time, me and my co-founder, we're definitely people that like efficiency because we had so much project. And when you're trying to make any kind of startup work, you have to think about efficiency when you don't have any venture capital, which why would we get any venture capital for a consulting company? Makes no sense. So we were just trying to get efficiency and be more profitable because we were thinking about the bottom line. And that's really the bottom line is what got us to start thinking about the productization. Like, how can we make more money? How can we make this even more profitable?
Love that.
So, yeah.
And so for a couple of years, y'all did Pattern.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, there's the difference between building like a cool niche internal product and then taking it and, burning the ships to go and like bet it all on this product. Talk to us about that evolution.
Yeah, I think that was a really pivotal moment when our third co-founder, Daniel, who's also our CTO, joined our team. And that was in 2017. Gosh, years are starting to all merge together now. But that was a little while ago. And it was when we decided that, okay, we really do want to go all in and make this happen. Or like, can't turn off lights on Pattern because that's going to continue paying for this kind of side venture at the time and see what happens. So it's really when he joined the team and when we created the beta version of an app that somebody other than the three of us could use, who were basically coding a little bit there, pulling everything together, debugging, super manual. And it's when we had that and launched the beta version into the masses and how quickly it got picked up. We're like, okay, this is going to be really, really cool. So it took us about 7 to 8 months to go from let's make a beta version and let's launch it to launching it.
And when you mean launching it to the masses, are you taking that product and saying, hey, to your network of customers at Pattern, here is a cool product that you can use without our help, and it will help you get 20% of the way there or 60% of the way there. Is that how you? quote unquote lost.
Not even a little bit, because that was our revenue at the time. We weren't going to jeopardize the only thing that was going to make us money. So we showed it to everybody else.
Duh. Yes.
And then everybody else was like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. We're like, okay, cool. Now we can show it to the other people because we can't jeopardize our source of revenue. And then we felt fairly comfortable doing that, to the point where after we did the beta version, then we did our formal launch. And within like a month, which seemed like the longest month at the time, but now in retrospect, I guess it was fine. But within a month of that, we had our first sale. We're like, okay, so people want to give us money for this. This is great. Let's make some more.
And it only gave you more confidence to go all in on the product.
Exactly.
And so about the time y'all did Atlanta Startup Battle and won that, talk to us about that process. Atlanta Startup Battle, 400 applicants, 500 applicants, 5 up on stage, and y'all were the winners, right? That was a great platform to get out. Talk to us about that process.
Yeah, I thought that in itself was really what gave us wings, because $100,000 in retrospect doesn't sound like a whole lot, or it could really give you all the juice you need, but it gave us all the wings we needed to basically shut down consulting and architecture altogether and be like, yeah, we can keep lights on for 6 months, even if we have to, on this shoestring budget, until we figure out other better plans, because we really did believe that we were going somewhere really, really awesome and really, really big. So that was an interesting process. I mean, we literally saw a post on LinkedIn. It was like random Friday. I was like, that looks cool. Let me apply, see what this is. And then we ended up applying, and it was like, come in for a mentor day. It was like, that sounds like it could be helpful. And we Googled the people that were going to be there on mentor day. It was like, seem like really important, helpful people. Let's go check it out. And then we just kind of casually checked it out, and it was the coolest thing ever until we presented. And even when we were pitching, we were like, no pressure. This is just going to be good exposure. We don't have to win. We already have our thing going. And then we won. It was like, okay, this is great.
Absolutely. And so tell us more about the, building the product, and maybe even just a quick 30 seconds on the cove.tool, the value prop, the big vision, right? Because it started out as a tool, but now it's morphing into a much bigger platform. Walk us through what the evolution of that as well.
Sure. So what cove.tool really does is it provides design intelligence, and it does so in an automated way. The key value prop is that all of this design intelligence was previously hidden by consultants like ourselves, because we'd charge $50K to share this intelligence versus just having it accessible to people.
And is the intelligence the variables that a building can decide on when they build it and develop it, where, we may not want windows over here, or we may not want this type of material. And if it's 10 feet tall versus 12 feet tall, this gives you a certain savings on energy. I mean, is this the type of intelligence that at a very high level?
At a high level, it's like there's 1,000 different decisions that one has to make on a building, everything from shape to location to positioning to materiality. And cove.tool provides intelligence in 2 key divisions. Like the first set of intelligence is to really balance all of the different parameters around, what the building is going to be like and how that affects your daylight and your glare and your radiation and all water and energy, because there's no way to do that manually by a human. Because humans are great, but we can't compute that many different objectives
quickly.
Well,
yeah.
And then the other way that it's providing value is once you've kind of figured out the shape, etc., you take it to the next level and then optimize the materials that are going into it to meet your regulations. So if you're like, okay, let's say I'm a developer in Atlanta and I care about, green, but not really. I want to make sure that I can pay for it, because at the end of the day, it's bottom line, which is what I completely understand. And if they're just trying to meet their bottom line and they just have to meet regulations, which every building has to meet, then the developer can balance out, should I spend on these really high-end windows, or should I cheap out on the windows and add a little bit better insulation that Owens Corning gives me? Or should I cheap out on insulation and windows, but put this career HVAC system, or maybe I should add some sensors. So it looks through thousands of alternatives and helps users figure out the cheapest way to get to their performance target. So that's the value prop for the developers and the contractors, while the early part of the app is the key driver for the architects and the engineers. So that's how we split up our users as well.
Well said. Okay. I get it now. And so
that's awesome.
Are y'all selling to the builders, to the architects? And then I imagine there's probably some inventory intelligence as well, right?
Yeah, we got product manufacturers because we have product databases, and for them, this is an incredible sales automation and eventually a marketplace, but right now a sales automation piece, because they originally sold their products by taking cupcakes to the architect's office and being like, hey, specify my product. But now the architects and the engineers who are specifying the products can just objectively do the comparison and be like, okay, this is the most cost efficient one for my project.
Makes total sense. So you just raised 5.7. Tell us about the fundraising process.
It was really, really, I thought it was really crazy was the way I was going to put it, because originally I was thinking about fundraising in March, which, as we know, March 2020, everybody's plans changed for everything in the world. So that was not a good time. But luckily, we had plenty of runway, and we were raising not because we were going to run out of runway, but we were raising because we were ready to grow. So after we kind of started hitting specific metrics, which I'm a sucker for metrics. Like, I can't stop staring at them. Yeah. But once we kind of hit the metrics that we had set out for ourselves, we were like, okay, we're doing pretty good. I think we can raise a solid round. And
are those metrics revenue, net expansion, customer acquisition?
Yeah. So it's everything from our ARR to ARR growth rate to our net negative churn to our gross margins to make sure we're doing something somewhat efficiently.
Yeah.
Was kind of like the few things that we were looking at. So once we kind of got to that close to $1 million ARR mark, and we were doing it efficiently with our 18%, we're like, okay, I think we can do something here. I think we can raise a round that's reasonable, and just keep building this even more. And so how did y'all decide on who to focus on? Talk to us about the process that you were in. Yeah, definitely. So we started with a list of 15 funds that we were super, super interested in. And then this was in August. So after March, we decided not to do our raise in March because that'd just be stupid. So in August, we were like, okay, I think we are ready to do a raise because everybody had seemed to come back from the COVID stuffs, all Zoom ready. So we're like, okay, here's the 15 people that we are really, really excited about. And Mucker, who we ended up raising with, was actually on that list as well. And we had been previously introduced to them with ATDC as well. So we were like, okay, we already know them. We really, really like them. We're going to continue to pursue them. So we reached out to all of these 15 people with, warm intros and just found people that knew them to make sure that we could get a meeting. And then basically 2 weeks after that, we had a few term sheets and few that we really, really liked and few that we really, really wanted to work with and just kind of went with it.
I love that. And so right now you're in hiring mode, right? Before we press play, you said 2 or 3 folks are onboarding today. Tell us about the makeup of the team, who you're looking for right now.
Yeah, so we're looking for almost everybody, but predominantly sales and customer success, because that portion of the company is growing really, really fast because, there's so much sales that we're able to do now just because the product is so good. So we're expanding our sales team drastically, also so that we can sell to strategic international locations. And of course, customer success kind of goes hand in hand because we have so much land and expand in all of our deals. So we're super focused on that, followed by, of course, software, because the product, there's still a good bit to go. We're not done with the product.
Yep. And so do y'all sell to, so let's say if a builder buys it, right? Is it one license for the entire project, or is it several seats per architects?
Sure. So the builder buys it based on the square footage of their project for the project, and the architects and engineers, they buy it by seats.
Nice.
So it really depends. And so we have a different model for each type of industry. And it took us some work to figure out the right model. And I'm sure we'll continue to further refine it because, I mean, who knows? I think this model works really, really well. All the data points us to believe that, but we do a whole bit of testing with different frameworks to really figure out what it is that we want to do.
Sure. So let's talk about the Atlanta front. I remember visiting y'all's office a couple years ago. You were downtown. Pre-COVID, there was a strong move towards downtown. Tell us about what it's like working downtown today. There's great restaurants, Big Dave's. We've had Big Dave on, or Derek on the podcast. But give us a sense of what's it like building and scaling a software company in downtown Atlanta.
I think it's perfect. And I had a choice, right? Multiple times. And I kept choosing downtown over and over again for a few key reasons. It's really, really well connected MARTA-wise. So everybody, no matter where they live, can get to work when we are working in the office, hopefully post-COVID, really easily, which of course makes a big difference. There's so many restaurants. There's also a whole bunch of architecture, engineering, and construction firms that are located in downtown. So again, not really a possibility or a thing now, but in a non-COVID world, it made sense. We actually went and did in-person demos to close some of our really large deals because we literally could walk over in 5 minutes and be done.
Yeah.
Tons of restaurants. I mean, it's really, really nice. I love it here. And it's 1/3 the cost of Midtown or Buckhead. And it just doesn't make sense. I'd rather give that in terms of benefits to team members than just spending on some really expensive office space.
A scrappy entrepreneur at heart. Talk to us about the vision of cove.tool. Is this something where you want it to be hundreds of employees, global, or is there a number in mind that y'all are looking to get to and then sell?
We're really looking to continue to grow the company because in our space specifically, there's 3 or 4 key players. And these are the ones that pretty much acquire every startup that wants to be acquired. The key thing is that in the space as well, many of these players are just not good for innovation, and they'll acquire startups and then innovation dies. So we're at the core growing the company so that we can be an additional opportunity for other smaller startups, couple 3 years down the line, so that they could exit into cove.tool and continue to grow in an ecosystem that's innovation friendly versus an ecosystem that's not so much innovation friendly. So that's where we're headed.
I love that. Well, Sandeep, a couple more questions. We're coming up on time, and I really appreciate your you carving out time today. So Forbes 30 under 30, lots of involvement. What are some of the big decisions and ways that you have resources that you've leveraged, right? Whether it's mentors or books or things that have gotten you to where you are?
It's so many things. It's so many helpful people. I mean, yourself, we've spoken over the last couple of years. That's been helpful. But I do believe that it's a lot of reading and a lot of networking with other founders that are 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of me, doing what I'm doing and have gone through the same problems and just talking through those. That's been really, really effective. And I do think that Atlanta has a strong community for that as you start to find your people.
Sure. And what is your reading process? Is it more books? Is it blog posts? Is it all the above? Because obviously it's a little bit.
I live by. It's a little bit of both. I live by SaaSTR. I don't even know if that's how you're supposed to say it, but I read it all the time because it has so much helpful info. So it's so much blogs, but books are really, really helpful too. For example, the day that we decided that we were going to raise, the first thing that I did was not to buy books about raising, but to buy books about what I was going to do when I was done raising. Because it's that's going to be the hard part, because sure, raising will be a problem of its own, but I'll really need to know how to make sure that we use every penny of that money really, really efficiently to benefit us in the best way possible. So So it's a lot of reading. I mean, I enjoy books. They're fun.
Absolutely. Sandeep, we always finish the conversation with why Atlanta and what has Atlanta done for you, and would love to learn more about that.
I mean, Atlanta, I can't even imagine building the startup any place other than Atlanta, predominantly because of like incredibly low cost of living and awesome like tech hubs. Like we got ATV, ATDC, Tech Square. I mean, we've got a lot going on. And I think Atlanta has done a good bit for me. I mean, we literally got started in Atlanta with the startup battle with our first cash. All of the fantastic folks that I've been able to connect with, like Tanya Sams, like she's such a good resource for women in tech to really be able to bounce ideas off and be like, how would you handle this? How would you handle this really, really strange conversation? Or how would you go about it that way? And I mean, she's such a source of inspiration, and so many other people. So, I mean, they're literally, I mean, non-COVID times, we live in the same building that she works in. So it'd be like, we're going home and it's like, hey, Tanya. And she was like, so, I mean, that aside, I mean, it's just been really, really helpful. And of course, Georgia Tech, because being an alum, they're all so supportive. Like if I have, of course, like an actual research question, I mean, there's a whole range of PhD students that are experts in the industry that I can bounce ideas off. I can go to lab directors. I can bounce actual legitimate thoughts of. And of course, recruiting. Like our last 4 hires have all been from tech for software. And we continue to bring on more and more talent from tech because, well, it's awesome.
Yeah. Sandeep Ahuja, thank you so much for being part of the Atlanta Story podcast. We really appreciate your time today.
So happy to be here. I really, really enjoyed your questions. I really appreciate it.
This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Lucas and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.